Daisy was a beautiful, educated woman with a big job as the manager of the biggest bank in the country. She was hardworking and very assertive. Most employees were afraid of how tough she was, but her dedication to the bank made some secretly like her. Her boss Tango was so proud of her because she brought in most of the profits and clients. She was very smart and intelligent. However, some of her co-workers were secretly jealous of her success. One rainy morning, as Daisy and the employees were busy working, her boss Tango walked up to her very seriously. Daisy smiled at him as usual, holding out her fist for a fist bump. Instead, he looked angry and banged his fist on Daisy's desk. All the employees stand in shock. "You are fired, Daisy! Clean up your desk and get out of here!" Tango shouted. Daisy was shocked and asked Tango what was the problem and what had she done wrong. Tango took out his laptop and showed evidence that Daisy had been stealing millions from the bank for years. He angrily accused her of stealing his money. Some employees looked happy and smirked, while others felt sad for her. Tango had already alerted all the banks in the country about Daisy's actions. Daisy tried to explain that she had been set up, but Tango didn't want to hear it. He called security, which threw her out of the bank premises as it rained. Tango warned her that he could have arrested her, but was letting her go because of their friendship. He closed the gates on her and went back to the bank. Daisy tried to plead with the guards, who were her good friends, but they refused to help, following the boss's orders. She sat down outside the bank, crying in the rain, saying her career was over and wondering what she would do now. One of the guards, Okello, came to her with an offer. "There's a vacancy at a place where I work the night shift. A rich man needs a caretaker. It pays a lot less than what you earned here, but it might help you while you look for a better job," he said. Daisy looked at him angrily, asking how dare he to lower her standards like that. From bank manager to caretaker, she reminded him that she had a master's degree and would never accept a caretaker job, even if she were on her deathbed. Okello looked at her with concern. "I know how you feel right now, but please call me if you need a job. You already have my number. Trust me, you will call me." Daisy sneered and walked away through the rain back home. In the following days, Daisy kept applying for jobs but got rejected whenever she appeared for interviews because her picture had circulated everywhere. Her friends and family sent her job links, but she got rejected for all of them. Her bills and expenses had started to pile up. She was broke and exhausted. She then remembered Okello's job offer, found his number in her phone and called him. Okello didn't give much details but gave her the location of the job. Daisy wondered why they hadn't found a caretaker for a rich man after all these weeks, but proceeded to the location. It was a beautiful mansion in the richest part of the city. As she entered, she heard men and women screaming. A woman ran out of the mansion saying she would never return to that place no matter what. Daisy was scared, but determined to secure the job. She entered and was welcomed by a man who took her to an office, telling her to wait for the boss. She kept hearing a man screaming and the sound of a cane, as if the man was being beaten and asking for mercy. Suddenly, the office door opened and a man in a wheelchair entered. Daisy was shocked but smiled. The man asked what she was doing there. She replied that she had come for a job and was waiting for the boss to interview her. The man replied, smiling sarcastically, "Okay, let's wait for the boss to come. I'm also here for an interview." Daisy smiled and wished him luck. "So what do you think of those noises out there? I heard the boss is a very angry man. Will we manage?" he asked. Daisy looked at him, shaking her head and rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, I've seen and heard worse. The goal is to stay focused on my job. Why would the boss attack me if I'm focused on business? Unless he's crazy. I'll show him that I'm crazier." They both laughed. He then asked what she would do to the boss. Daisy sensed tension and replied that they would have to wait and see. He looked at her smiling and studying her. Just then, a man entered the office, crying and begging the man in the wheelchair to give him his job back or pay him because he had a family and had worked there for 10 years. Daisy then realized the man in the wheelchair was the boss. The man in the wheelchair took out his stick from the back of the chair and started beating the man mercilessly, asking him to get out of his house. Daisy was absolutely shocked. She got up and firmly held the man's stick, which painfully slammed against her fingers. She asked what kind of behavior this was, looking angrily at the already angry boss. He shouted at her to move or he would. Before he could finish, Daisy asked what he would do. Beat her up? I dare you to hit me, even once like this. I promise you won't know what will happen next, because you'll find yourself in a hospital. The boss looked at her, shocked, wondering what kind of audacity this was. No one had ever talked to him like that in this house. How dare you talk to me like that in my own house? He shouted. Daisy replied, just wait and watch. She got out her phone and called the police to inform them of the situation. But before she could, the boss asked her to put the phone down, agreeing to pay the employee. He didn't want any trouble with the police. He quickly turned on his laptop and transferred the money to the man, asking him to never return to his house. The man thanked Daisy for what she had done for him and stormed off. Daisy then looked at the boss angrily, grabbed her bag and stormed out. But before she could move out of the gate, the boss, who had been following her in the wheelchair, shouted, "So when can you start?" Daisy stopped and looked at him, shocked. "You've got the job. When do you want to start?" the boss repeated. Daisy replied, "Today." The man then held out his hand and introduced himself as James. James was a wealthy businessman who lived a humble but lavish life. He was good to his employees and family before the accident that crippled him. They loved him so much. He loved them too. After the accident, James's life changed completely. His wife Sabiti, who had always been by his side, left him. She ran away with his best friend. This betrayal hurt James deeply. He felt angry and bitter all the time. James started to misbehave with everyone, especially if they tried to show him sympathy for his paralyzed legs. He would shout at the employees at home and punish them for the smallest mistakes. Sometimes he would even hit them with his stick. The once loved boss had turned into someone everyone feared. Now Daisy had become James's new caretaker, not because she loved the job, but because she needed the money. They discussed the salary and job description. Daisy had to stay at the mansion from now on. James introduced Daisy to the rest of the workers at the house and left them to get familiar with each other. The workers were afraid of James and kept their heads bowed the whole time. James thought to himself, "I will teach you a lesson for what you have done, Daisy. This is the beginning of your suffering." He wasn't happy with how Daisy had challenged him in front of his employee, and there was no way he would let her off that easily. He went to his office. The house manager, an old lady who had worked at the mansion since James was a kid, approached Daisy warmly and welcomed her. She warned Daisy to be careful with James after what she had done earlier. No employee had ever stood up to James like that. She told Daisy that he would definitely get back at her somehow. All the other caretakers didn't even last 2 days in the mansion because of James, so she had to be very careful. The other employees smiled proudly at Daisy for standing up at their annoying boss. Daisy began her duties, cooking healthy meals for James, administering James's medication on time, guiding him in physical therapy, etc. At the end of the day, Daisy was tired and ready to go to bed, but James called her to his room with a sinister smile, ordering her to undress him and bathe him as part of her job. Daisy felt scared and defiantly refused, saying she couldn't do that. James rolled his wheelchair closer to her, smirking at her scared face. "You're not so brave now, are you, Daisy?" Daisy threatened him, saying this wasn't in the job description and she would report him to the police. James laughed and told her to relax. He was just kidding, and that someone else would do that. He threatened her to sleep with one eye open tonight. Daisy left his room feeling scared and embarrassed. She walked to the kitchen and found the house manager, who told her a bit about James's life and what had happened to him. One evening, James was standing on the balcony, which cracked and fell to the ground. It was a miracle that he survived, but his lower body got paralyzed in the process. His wife Sabiti stayed with him for a few months, but she felt he had become a burden and she ran off with his best friend. Daisy felt sad for him, understanding why he developed such a temper after his accident. He was traumatized. As Daisy lay in her new bed, she couldn't sleep. Suddenly she heard a noise coming from James's room, so she immediately rushed there and checked on him. He was having a nightmare, begging Sabiti not to leave him, saying the balcony should have killed him because he couldn't take the pain anymore. Daisy touched his hand, trying to comfort him, but he quickly woke up and tightly grabbed her hand, almost bruising it. He shouted at her to get out of his room and quickly grabbed his stick to cane her. He looked crazy and sweaty. Daisy ran out before he could beat her. James threw the stick, which thankfully hit the door that closed behind Daisy. Daisy was scared, wondering what kind of hell she had gotten herself into. All the other workers had gathered, looking at Daisy and feeling sad for her. In the following days, Daisy blended in with the staff around the mansion and took care of James no matter how difficult he was. They always quarreled around the house like a married couple. It was like fire meeting fire. Somehow, James's behavior had changed over the weeks. He no longer beat up his employees. Daisy had recorded him beating an employee and threatened to expose him on the internet. She even incited all the employees to strike until James agreed to treat them like humans. James's behavior started changing over time. He was extremely intimidated by Daisy, but also fascinated. No woman had ever stood up to him like that. He hated her for that, but deep down admired her confidence. Daisy was good at her job. She had an MBA and was obviously overqualified for this job. He wondered what had forced her to apply for such a lousy job. During their therapy sessions, Daisy advised James to open up, but he refused, asking her to mind her own business. "You will open up one day, and I won't even have to ask," Daisy said as she walked away. "Never!" James shouted, feeling embarrassed. The house manager saw something special in Daisy and asked her to never leave James until he was completely changed. It had only been a month, but she was the only caretaker who had stayed that long, and James's behavior had already started improving. He was still verbally abusive, but not physical anymore. He learned to control his anger around workers every time Daisy was present to avoid lectures. One morning, the doorbell rang. Daisy was nearby having a session with James, so she opened the door. It was James's ex-wife, Sabiti, with a sinister smile on her face. James shouted at her, asking why she was there. He quickly grabbed his cane and asked her to get out of his house. All the servants gathered upon hearing the noise. Sabiti was calmly smiling and asked James to calm down. She said she had brought some good news for him and handed him an envelope. James beat the envelope with his stick to the floor and called his men to kick her out. Sabiti asked them to let her go and left, smirking at James. James went into his office, shouting at the staff to get back to work. Daisy picked up the envelope and brought it to James in his office. He pretended, asking Daisy to throw it away, but as she did, he grabbed it and quickly opened it. Inside was an invitation to Sabiti's wedding with his former best friend. He quickly got angry, shouting and throwing everything off the table. Daisy looked scared and asked what it said. James shouted at her to leave or else he would fire her, but Daisy defiantly stayed, asking him to fire her after talking to him. My ex-wife has invited me to her wedding with my former best friend, he said painfully. Daisy was shocked. James was in so much pain. She wanted to hug him and comfort him, but instead said, "Then let's go to the wedding together." James looked at Daisy in shock. He refused at first, but Daisy convinced him that showing up with a beautiful woman by his side would show his ex-wife and ex-best friend that he had moved on. "So you know that you're beautiful?" James asked. It sounded more like a confession than a question. Daisy blushed, feeling embarrassed. She picked up the invitation from the floor and, to her surprise, she saw that James's ex-wife was getting married to none other than her ex-boss, Tango. "Oh my God! Tango is your ex-best friend?" she asked. James was shocked and asked if she knew him. She then told him her story, how Tango fired her, accusing her of stealing bank money, and how he ruined her career, leading her to take this job. James was shocked. He hadn't fully read through Daisy's CV when she applied. Otherwise, he would have known where she had worked and who she worked for. James then jokingly asked whether she really stole the money. Daisy looked angry, saying she wouldn't be here if she had stolen that much money. James smiled and opened up to Daisy. He told her his life story and what had happened to him. It left Daisy in tears. James always cried thinking of his past, but today he had no tears. Instead, he looked at the crying Daisy and asked why she was crying. Daisy wiped her tears, realizing she was crying. She quickly got angry, changed the topic and moved out. That night, James spoke to Okello the guard during his night shift, asking about Daisy's behavior at the bank. Okello told him how good Daisy was and that he didn't think she would steal money from the bank. James asked him to keep this conversation a secret. Daisy saw them talking and approached James as he was going to his bedroom. James denied it and Daisy stormed out to ask Okello, but she slipped. Before she could fall, James grabbed her and she ended up sitting on his lap in the wheelchair. Their lips accidentally brushed. Daisy and James felt a surge of unexpected electricity, their hearts pounding. Their faces flashed with confusion and desire, both grappling with the undeniable spark of a hidden attraction. They quickly pulled away and argued, blaming each other, and proceeded to their rooms, both in denial of what they had felt when their lips brushed. Finally, the day of the wedding came. James had bought a beautiful dress for Daisy. She had refused at first, asking him to use her salary to buy it. James accepted, and she eventually wore it. She looked stunning. All the employees admired her beauty, but James was mesmerized. He couldn't stop thinking about how beautiful she looked, her elegance radiating as she moved. James himself was smartly dressed in a suit, sitting in his wheelchair. They arrived at the reception party. Sabiti and Tango were shocked to see them. Tango was particularly surprised to see Daisy with James and asked how they knew each other, shaming Daisy and calling her a thief. Daisy and James were furious as Sabiti and Tango laughed. All the guests gathered to witness the drama. Sabiti then noticed Daisy's dress and embarrassed her, asking James if he was giving out her old dresses to his servants now. Daisy was shocked, feeling betrayed by James. He had tricked her into wearing Sabiti's dress. James laughed at Sabiti, saying Daisy looked better in the dress than she ever did. Daisy was heartbroken. Sabiti, consumed by jealousy, grabbed Daisy, trying to take off her dress. The fight ensued, and James intervened, pushing Sabiti away. Tango, disappointed by Sabiti's jealousy, confronted her, accusing her of still loving James after everything he had done for her. In the heat of the moment, he confessed that he had set up the balcony for James to fall and die so that he could elope with Sabiti. The crowd gasped, recording everything on their phones. James was shocked and heartbroken. His best friend wanted him dead, just to steal his wife. Daisy and Sabiti were shocked too. Sabiti apologized to James, saying she didn't know about that, but James pushed her, asking her not to touch him. Suddenly, the police arrived and arrested Tango for stealing the bank customers' money and framing Daisy for it. He had used the stolen money to pay for the wedding and to go on vacations with Sabiti. He was arrested for both his crimes. Daisy was in shock, realizing James had investigated the crime and helped clear her name. James tried to talk to Daisy, but she slapped him, saying she thought he had changed but he hadn't. How dare he make her wear Sabiti's dress? James apologized, feeling guilty, realizing what he had done. Daisy stormed off, went back to James's house and packed her belongings. When James returned, he frantically asked the employees where Daisy was. They told him she had gone. He cried, unable to believe it, saying she couldn't leave him. Why does everyone always leave him? He searched her room, but it was empty. Everything was gone. There was only a resignation letter Daisy had left for him. James cried bitterly and called Daisy's number, but it was off. The house manager looked at James and realized he was in love with Daisy. James asked Okello for Daisy's address and stormed off with his driver to find her. He arrived at Daisy's house, knocking desperately on the door. Daisy opened, shocked to see him. "Daisy, please, I need to talk to you," James pleaded, tears streaming down his face. Daisy hesitated but finally accepted to talk to him. "What do you want, James?" she asked, her voice cold. James took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Daisy. I know I made a mistake. I shouldn't have made you wear that dress. I should have respected you. But please believe me, I regret it. I feel so disgusted by my actions. You made me a better person. I can't lose you, Daisy." Daisy's eyes softened, but she remained silent. James continued, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but finding your room empty at home made me realize I can't live without you, Daisy. You have become a big part of my life. I can't even deny it. I'm not the James I was a few months ago." Daisy looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. "James, I need time. You hurt me deeply, and I can't just forget that." James nodded, understanding. "I'll give you all the time you need, Daisy. Just think about it, please." He left. Daisy returned to work after 3 days. James was so happy and relieved. The workers were happy seeing their boss smiling at last. Over the following weeks, James worked hard to prove himself. He treated his employees with respect, showing kindness, and continued his therapy. Daisy watched from a distance, her heart slowly softening. She saw the genuine change in James and started to believe in him again. One evening, James invited Daisy to dinner. They sat on the dining, talking and laughing. James looked at Daisy, his heart full of love. "Daisy, you've given me a second chance at life. I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Will you give me another chance?" Daisy smiled, tears in her eyes. "Yes, James," she agreed. "I have something for you," James said, handing her a letter. Daisy read through it. It was an appointment letter. It said that she was the new manager of all his companies. "James, is this real?" Daisy asked, her eyes wide with happiness. "Yes, Daisy," James replied, smiling. "You deserve this and much more after what Tango did to you. You've worked hard and shown incredible strength." Daisy's face lit up with joy. "Thank you, James," she said, hugging him and kissing his cheek. They both froze, staring at each other. James took a deep breath. "Daisy, I think I love you." Daisy's heart raced. "I love you too, James," she said softly. They leaned in and shared a big, loving kiss. It felt like magic, both of them feeling pure happiness. Meanwhile, Sabiti was now broke after Tango's assets were frozen. She deeply regretted leaving James. She realized too late how much she had lost. James and Daisy spent the next 3 years dating, growing closer and building a strong relationship. They were happy together, supporting each other through everything. Finally, James asked Daisy to marry him. Their wedding was beautiful, filled with friends, employees, family, and laughter. James and Daisy promised to love each other forever, and they kept that promise every day. They lived happily ever after, always grateful for the love and happiness they had found. The end. What do you think of this story, guys? If you've liked this story, please leave a thumbs up to this video, and guys, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Hit the bell icon so that you're notified every time I post new videos. Stay tuned for the next video, guys, and thank you for watching.